Kimmerha Huladunia, Fauchagu, Ye Olde Scots, the Celtic podcast. You know, I've done 50 of these podcasts, and I've said that at the beginning of every podcast. I don't know if I've ever explained that, because I know some people, they have a little Gaelic and they know what I'm saying, but most don't. Kimmerha Huladunia means, how is everybody? And Fauchagu means, welcome to Ye Olde Scots, that's my nickname, Celtic podcast. All right. On today's show in Feuchamaich Beagan Gaidhlig, which is Let's Try a Little Gaelic, we will continue our 25-week Beginner's Gaelic course with Lesson 12. And we're going to talk about past tense. We're also going to talk about Alasdair Colkitto MacColla in our Celtic history segment, one of the Scottish badasses of history. And you'll hear about the Irish goddess Danu in everyday Celtic ways. Now, throughout the program, we're going to hear music from Steve MacDonald, Really Jiggered, Alasdair Fiona Nachona, Capercaillie, and Johnny McAvoy. And as always, it's a wee bit of Irish trivia to test your knowledge to start us off. All right. So, what is a Galway hooker? And keep your mind out of the gunner, it's not that. All right. Check out the Ye Olde Scot Facebook group, where you can be a part of the Celtic culture, post memes, give me ideas, tips, and even criticism. But please be nice. Feuchamaich, let's kick this thing off. Alright, that was Elin Dún by Kepper Cayley. And now, Han Tom and Feuchamaich Beagan Gaidhlig, it's time for Let's Try a Little Gaelic. Now, I am not an authority on the Gaelic language, I just love learning it. I struggle like most learners and I want to help. So what I teach comes right from the well-respected Gaelic teachers, so I hope you'll find it interesting, informative, and fun. I always display on the screen what I'm discussing so you can follow along. Today we'll be in that 25-part Gaelic lesson, and we're going to do lesson 12, and it's the past tense of the verb to be. Now, like all verbs in Gaelic, there is only one form for all persons. For a positive statement in the past tense, this is va. Just add the subject to it, either a pronoun or a noun. This gives you the basis on sentence structure, just like in the present tense. Verb, subject, and everything else. Alright, pronouns are combined with the verb va as follows. Va me is I was. Va u, you were. Va e, he was. Va e, she was. Va shin, we were. Va shiv, you were, and that's the plural or formal form. Va it, they were. Okay, now I know you've heard this before, but remember there's two ways to say you in Gaelic. It's u, which is you for the singular usage or the informal, for a friend, somebody you've known your whole life, or a child, and shiv, and that's you for a formal usage, showing respect, or if you don't know the person. And you also use that for a plural for when speaking to one or more persons. Now, adjectives can be used following the verb to be, the same as in the present tense. The adjective is the same for all subjects. So, like the feminine subject, va I fur, she was cold. Plural subject, va iet fur, they were cold. And the masculine subject, va Callum fur, Callum was cold. And the same goes for the other three forms of the verb to be in the past tense. You got the independent or the positive statement. You have the dependent or the negative statement. You have the interrogative or the positive question. And you have the negative interrogative or negative question. Okay, now you've already seen va as the positive statement in the past tense. Learning the negative statement and the positive and negative questions will open your abilities to form sentences and begin communicating even more in Gaelic. And here's some examples. Va, which of course is the positive statement. Va I fur, it was cold. And you have Caro, which is the negative statement. Caro I fur, it was not cold. And you have the positive question, which is Anro. Anro I fur, was it cold? And then you have the negative question, which is Nachro. Nachro I fur, was it not cold? Alright, and that's kind of it for va, as far as the past tense of the verb to be. Now you're going to see it, and you're going to need to use it, and I'm going to give you 6 sentences here to work on to give you some usage on it. So, number 1, va mi adol anan bu. Number 2, anro u adol yan skol. 3, karo mi adol yan skol. 4, vashinach aber antai. 5, nachro e roche. And 6, va e. Alright, that's it for Feuchamaich Beagan Gaidhlig. I hope you enjoyed it.
never see you again, and I'll never please you again. Live on, live on, live on, beloved one. Live on, my warrior son. Born of the isles, summerlet's child, fearless and brave, from birth to the grave. Land on hell, land on hell. Live on, beloved one. Live on, my warrior son.
Alright, that was Live On, My Warrior Son by Steve MacDonald. And that's a very fitting song because today in Celtic History Break, we're going to talk about Alasdair Colkitto MacColla. And he's quoted as saying, in reference to Scottish warriors, that they would rather eat the husks from their children's mouths. They would rather die at the altars, sepulchres, and hearths of their ancestors than submit. For they regard themselves as ancient nobility, king among kings. That's why Alasdair Colkitto MacColla is a Scottish Highland badass. Now, Alasdair MacColla was a gigantic, completely out of his mind, claymore-swinging Scottish Highlander, who spent a good portion of his short adult life completely wreaking havoc on his enemies, their families, their friends, their pets, and anyone he deemed worthy of a bloody, brutal destruction, or anyone unlucky enough to be named Campbell. As commander of a battle-hardened, take-no-bullshit company of veteran Scotch, Irish, Gaelic warriors, MacColla terrorized the Protestant populations of Northern Ireland and the Scottish lowlands in a series of bloody campaigns that would have him forever remembered as a noble hero to his clan and a bloodthirsty evil bastard to his enemies. Now, MacColla was kicking ass way back in 1640, meaning that he was out there rocking the claymore and tartan look a good 300 years or so after the William Wallace that is, was cleaving his way through the English feudal system. But despite being a little late to the party, MacColla would prove to be a worthy successor in a line of epic Scottish badasses. His legendary life starts out similar to that of Wallace. Alasdair Colkitto MacColla was the son of a clan chief and was known for his gigantic frame, and immense strength. Reportedly, he stood over 7 feet tall. MacColla, whose last name was also written in every variation of the MacDonald surname, was the sort of blood-raging Highlands warrior who was more than capable of cleaving you from brain to groin with a two-handed sword. Now, Alasdair developed a taste for battle at a young age while doing battle with his clan's ancient enemies, the Presbyterian Highlanders of Clan Campbell. Now, these two groups of angry, pissed-off Scotsmen spent much of Alasdair's formative years fighting an ongoing, increasingly brutal blood feud over land, religion, wealth, and political standing among the Highland clans. Now, despite all of the ass-kicking by Alasdair, Clan MacDonald was eventually beaten down by the Campbells. And then this is just one branch of the MacDonalds. The MacDonalds, this branch, lost almost all of their land, lost their homes, they were torched, and most of their people were killed, imprisoned, or exiled. Now, Alasdair's father, the local leader of Clan MacDonald, spelled Macdonnell, was one of those imprisoned, later to be executed in captivity, though. Now, after this crushing defeat, Alasdair was forced to leave Scotland with a handful of survivors and relocate to Northern Ireland, where they took over as the leader of his defeated clan. But if there's one thing you'll need to remember about Alasdair MacColla, it's that this Highlander didn't give up for anything. He never half-assed anything, and he never turned his back on an opportunity to achieve bloody vengeance against his foes. The destruction of his clan only succeeded in making him more hell-bent on regaining his clan's status as soon as opportunity presented itself. And within a year or two after Alasdair was expelled to Ireland from his Scottish homeland, it did. All of Great Britain turned into a giant bloodbath of carnage and misery called the English Civil War. Now, among various different names for the same conflict, but I'll try to explain it in one brief paragraph. A dude named Oliver Cromwell decided he wanted to overthrow King Charles I of England. Now, he was supported by the Presbyterians, also known as Covenanters in Scotland and in Ireland. Now, King Charles didn't want to be overthrown, obviously, so he gathered royalists to fight against Cromwell. Supported by the Catholics in Scotland and Ireland, they were also known as Confederates because Charles was a Scotsman who married a Catholic princess, which they were okay with, and also because these guys hated the Presbyterians and were really just looking for any reason to kill them. So, hey, if the King of England wants to start it, why not? To make a long story short, Alasdair MacColla was a Catholic, a Confederate, and a Royalist, and a Scotsman who lived in Ireland, and commanded a now battle-hardened group of Scots and Irishmen who wanted nothing more than to wade through a battlefield knee-deep in the blood of their enemies. So, okay, now to the good part. Once MacColla went from firstborn son of the Irish leader of Scotland's most powerful Highland clan to mercenary commander leading the remnants of his clan in a bloody crusade against those who have wronged him, things started to get a little bit over the top. Now, it started with the Ulster Insurrection in 1641, when the Irish Catholics decided to go to war with England by going to war with any Presbyterian they could find. Now, MacColla commanded 2 companies of Highlanders in a series of raids that pillaged, burned, and plundered much of the countryside, laying waste to Covenanter lands, and when Protestant Lord Archibald Stuart suddenly showed up near the town of Kilrea with 6 full companies of Covenant infantry, MacColla ordered his men to pull their broadswords and run full out towards a force 3 times its own size. The Covenanters, many of whom had never really seen battle before, immediately crapped their pants and ran for the hills. What was left was mowed down with ease by MacColla's men. Now, despite recording victory after victory, Alasdair proving himself to be a daring, bordering on reckless commander, the Confederate Catholics in Ireland were eventually defeated, a loss that can be chalked up to the fact that MacColla's commanding officer was an inexperienced Randall MacDonald of the Irish MacDonalds. The war was lost while MacColla was badly wounded in battle when he was shot and stabbed, possibly at the same time, and ended up having to spend a year or two laying low and recovering from injuries. That would probably have been fatal to a lesser man, but not for MacColla. Now, it would take more than just a couple gaping chest wounds to keep Alasdair MacColla down. And by 1644, not only had he completely recovered from his injuries, but he had assembled a force of 1,600 Gaelic mercenary badasses, loaded them onto warships, and crash-landed right in the middle of his clan's ancient homeland, a land now occupied by the hated Campbells. Now, immediately upon landing, MacColla and the returned Clan MacDonald began to completely destroy everything they could get their hands on, plundering and pillaging and burning. He and his rampaging Highlanders created a swath of destruction 40 miles wide, destroying any Campbell or Covent force that they came across. Now, in their razing of the land, they burned people alive, wiped out entire cities, captured some castles, and basically did so much horrible stuff to everyone they met that the Campbells rewarded MacColla for his unbridled cruelty by giving him an incredibly badass name, Alasdair the Devastator. Well, maybe not so much awesome if you were a Campbell, but, MacColla liked to argue that he was just doing to the Campbells what they had done to his people a decade earlier. I don't think his mama ever said that 2 wrongs don't make a right. While Alasdair returned to his ships, he found that a group of Campbells had snuck in, killed the guards, and burned the ships while MacColla was out plundering their cities. Now, this was bad news for him because it meant now he's completely surrounded by people he'd just spent the last 12 months massacring and pillaging and killing. So without much in the way of reinforcements and supplies and money or food, he felt he was kind of screwed. But luckily, it wasn't long before Alasdair MacColla came across the Marquis of Montrose, another royalist Scottish general and fellow badass who was commanding an army of British infantry in support of King Charles. The 2 men joined forces and immediately embarked on an epic campaign of Covent smiting retribution across the Scottish lowlands. MacColla's troops, who by now were an elite cadre of hardened veterans, formed the shock troops at the core of Montrose's force. And together the 2 leaders proceeded to crush the enemy at the battles of Tippermoor, Aberdeen, Argyll, Inverlochy, Dundee, and numerous others. Now, despite being basically a British general, at this point, Alasdair didn't consider not kicking ass on the front lines for even 1 second. In combat, his unit was usually placed on the wings, and he was infamous for charging out ahead of his men, chopping the enemy pikes and spears in half with his claymore, and then having the honor of being the first man to dive into the enemy mass. This strategy eventually led to the creation of the tactic known as the Highland Charge, that he had first used in Ireland. Now, in the 17th century, the Covenanters were using muzzle-loading gunpowder muskets, and were less proficient with their swords as their predecessors had been. Now, MacColla saw the advantage of the old-school sword and shield, so he trained his men in advanced sword fighting and developed the Highland Charge, a tactic where the Scots would line up across from the Covenanters, and both sides would fire a volley of musket rounds at each other in true fashion of early modern warfare. Then, when the Covenanters went to reload their muskets, a process that would take anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds, depending on how skilled the musketeer is, the Highlanders would drop their guns, unsheathe their swords, and run full speed at the enemy, trying to get to them and butcher them to pieces before they could get to their weapons reloaded. I'm sure having all these Highlanders running at them, screaming and yelling with their swords, made them kind of nervous in the reloading, so that probably added a few seconds, I'm sure. Now, as you can imagine, this proved to be pretty effective. In one of his first battles alongside Lord Montrose, MacColla didn't have enough weapons to provide to his troops, so he had his men that didn't have weapons charged the enemy armed with only large rocks. When the fearless, basically weaponless Scotch-Irish badasses hit the enemy line, they brained the first guy that they came to with the rock, took that man's weapon, and then used it for the rest of the battle. Now, using this crap-inducing tactic of fear, terror, and blunt force trauma, MacColla's 2,000-man unit routed and annihilated a Covenanter force that outnumbered him 3-1. Now, at the Battle of Kilsyth, he charged uphill against orders and ended up breaking the enemy formation with a perfectly timed Highland charge. At Alasdair, his 500 men were surprise attacked by a coordinated attack from 4 full regiment of musketeers, but he managed to somehow hold off the attack long enough for Montrose's cavalry to get around the flank and break the enemy formation. MacColla was so pissed that he had been sneak attacked that he had his men run down every one of the enemy on foot through the moor and kill as many as they could find, which was quite a lot. Now, it was during this campaign that Alasdair MacColla and Clan MacDonald eventually completed their vengeance on the Campbells, an act they accomplished while fighting with Montrose at the Battle of Inverlochy in 1645. MacColla marched through a dense bog to flank the enemy castle, then charged straight into the enemy formation, crushing them and capturing the ancestral castle of Clan Campbell. He was knighted by Montrose in 1645, making him Sir Alasdair the Devastator. But the happy times wouldn't last forever. Even though things were going well in Scotland, the situation back in England was a different story. It turned out that Oliver Cromwell had defeated Charles's force, and the king issued an order for Montrose and all royalists to lay down their arms and return to England. Alasdair MacColla, though, refused. Montrose left, and MacColla, he continued to fight a series of futile battles over the next 2 years, where he was constantly surrounded by attackers and had basically no support. He was finally killed in 1647 at the Battle of Knocknanos. Hope I said that right. And today he's this larger-than-life folk hero who's, in a bunch of bagpipe tunes and Scottish drinking songs. Though most people don't know who he is, most non-Catholics still hate him to this day. All right. Now that is all about Alasdair Colkitto MacDonald. All right, I hope you liked Celtic History Break.
Shemolin na funach lam jetuna Is ken kat marachas in sunotchami Nachami kaline takami moye Mariale retsavrim Sarade kins narvim Moshe unchach kali senine kevikan hier Is heren raufen is rafen is jelkutan segrin Is jaren a beis na porken is aje awesome vi Heren kruare nach boyeshe Belofer juni vi Achewach ben fanach nunach ishine Ma vin tu nam bilam moskor laneti Ma vin tu lam bilam golo galaxy Ma vin tu lam bilam Kacharlach katachri Shimolen lefunach lam zetuna umavri
Alright, that was Kasig and Suging by Alasdair MacColla. Now it's time for Everyday Celtic Ways. Today we'll talk about Irish goddesses. And I'm going to start off with probably the most important, which is Danu. And Danu is the most ancient of the Celtic goddesses. She was referred to as the mother of the Irish gods, which indicates that she was a mother goddess. Now, in this guise, she probably represented the earth and its fruitfulness. Many place names in Ireland are associated with her, most notable the Paps of Anu in Kerry, which resemble the breast of a large supine female, a notable part of the landscape. Now, she is also known as Bian Tulak, which means lady farmer, which reinforces the fertility aspect of being a goddess. Many rivers are also associated with her and represent the fertility and abundance she brings to the land. Now, there is a suggestion that Danu might have had dual characteristics, one being the beneficent, nurturing mother goddess, and another being the strong, benevolent side of the warrior goddess. The root Dan in Irish means art, skill, poetry, knowledge, and wisdom. And so Danu is considered the earth goddess or the mother goddess. And that's pretty much it for her. I mean, I'm sure you'll get into a little more detail in this. I just kind of wanted to touch base. Going to try to do, an Irish goddess each podcast, a different one. So I encourage you to look her up and get some more information on her. All right, that's it for Everyday Celtic Ways.
You ask me why I look so sad on this bright summer day, or why the tears are in my eyes and I seem so far away. Well, sit yourself beside me, love, and put your hand in mine, and I'll tell you of someone I loved long, long before your time. I'm sitting here and thinking of those days so long ago, when I was just a child like you, and a girl I used to know. Through fields of green we laughed and played and sang our merry rhymes. Oh, summer days were warmer then, long, long before your time. Through childhood years our love did bloom, till our hearts were just as one. And we promised each eternal love in the church below the town. We settled in this little house I was proud to call her mine. Oh, we were young and happy then, long, long before her time. One lovely year was all we had until sickness came that stole the roses from her cheeks. My tears, they fell like rain. For 9 long months she carried you, but in the end she died. She chose to go so you might live long, long before your time. So you ask me why I look so sad on this bright summer day, or why the tears are in my eyes and I seem so far away. It's just you seem a lot like her when your eyes look into mine, and you smile so much like she did long, long before your time. And you smile so much like she did long, long before your time.
All right, and that was Long Before Your Time by Johnny McAvoy. Well, that's it for today's show. I hope you liked it. Trying to keep it interesting, informative, and fun, while showing you the beauty of all things Celtic, as always. Topalev Harrichin. Now, before I go, the trivia question answer, and that was, what is a Galway hooker? Bet you couldn't keep your mind out of the gutter, but it's traditionally a fishing boat used in Galway Bay off the coast of Ireland. Now, the hooker was developed specifically for the strong seas that they have there off the Galway Bay coast. So, there you go. It's a boat. Alright, remember to check out my YouTube channel, Olde Scot. It's got Learn a Gaelic Song videos, my Celtic podcast videos. I just reached number 50 the other day. This is 51. We got Speaking Our Language videos, all 4 seasons. We got some Celtic movies and some shows and some documentaries and a ton of music. And other videos as well, just some odd things here and there. I got my Facebook group, Olde Scot, on Facebook, where you can give me your insights and inputs. You can post things, just be a part of it. Martian Leavendrozda, bye for now. I'm going to let you go with the song Dueling Fiddles by Really Jiggered.